So how well is the UK doing in terms of the global picture? So this graph shows week by week change of confirmed COVID-19 deaths, and what it will show is the percentage change. So the hotter the country, the higher the percentage change. The colder the country shows a negative percentage change. So hot countries means that the death rate is increasing, cold countries means that the death rate is decreasing. So it was Italy that really got the first peak, as we know, and then France, unusually, and then Spain, and then the UK, more than 300%, and then Germany, and then Ireland and Poland. By this point, the whole of Europe was pretty much in lockdown. Italy had massively passed its peak, although it was still increasing its deaths by week, and it was only increasing by 20.9%. Italy had now turned cold. The UK was still in lockdown, and the deaths in the UK were still increasing by 163.2% per week. The same in France, 180.9% per week. But Germany had decreased to 93.7%. And by this point, we can see that mainland Europe had actually managed to control the virus quite well. The UK was still pretty much increasing by 69.4% per week. And it was only really here when France started to get a negative change, minus 25.9% per week, that the UK got to below under 10% increase per week. And it then moved over to Eastern Europe. And as we can see from then on, it's Eastern Europe that shows the hotter colours. And the UK is still yet to go this dark blue colour. So this shows in a map format the weekly confirmed deaths. And what you'll see is the hotter the country, so the more red the country, the more deaths there will be. And the more yellow the country, the less or fewer deaths there will be per week. So we see that throughout January, COVID-19 was really not a problem for Europe. It was at least under 50 deaths. And it was Italy that got the first peak of weekly confirmed COVID-19 deaths. And then it spread to France and Spain. And then from there it went to the UK. By this point, the UK was still not in lockdown. And then Spain and France started to increase their weekly deaths. And then the UK followed after that, basically. 1,684 per week. That compares to Italy's 5,514 per week and France's 2,164 per week. So the UK was still third or fourth in Europe, but was pretty bad at this point. And then throughout lockdown, especially by mid-April, the UK situation got particularly worse. So in Italy, it was 4,012 per week. They had now passed their peak, but the UK was still gaining deaths, 6,420 per week, the most in Europe. Okay, so this graph shows the total number of tests performed relative to the size of the population. And as I said before, the UK began testing in January because they invented the test, but then as the cases increased in the UK, we got behind. So it was really Germany by the start of March that became the best testers. And then Norway did exceptionally well. And then Italy and Switzerland. You can see a a very clear correlation actually, that by the middle of March, the countries that received the less deaths and the less cases, all in Eastern Europe, were actually doing the most testing. Ireland as well. And then throughout April, the UK is still not doing very many tests, still the palest on this graph. And then all of a sudden the UK starts doing tests. And by this point, it's way too late. So could the UK have done more? Okay, so this graph shows school closures, whether we could have closed schools sooner. Italy and Germany started requiring school closures back in February on all levels. Then France, then Greece and Bulgaria on some levels. And then pretty much the whole of Europe by the middle of March, except the UK. And then the UK. So the UK was really the last to join the lockdown process. So this graph shows the stringency index. So the darker the blue, the more stringent the country. The lighter the blue, the less stringent the country. And has the UK been strict enough in its lockdown? Obviously Italy became the strictest first, and then mainland Europe, and then the UK. But the UK was pretty much in line in terms of stringency with the rest of Europe, especially Germany and Eastern Europe, even though the UK is on the western side of Europe, and perhaps we should have been more in line with Spain or France's policies. What's clear to me is the number of the cases in the UK and deaths which followed all kind of spread in from Italy and then up to France and then across to Spain and then across to the UK. And for some reason, they might have gotten to Belgium and the Netherlands, but they didn't get past Germany, and therefore they didn't penetrate as much into Eastern Europe. And because of that, the UK was caught behind in terms of its testing. Germany already had a high testing capacity at the start of this crisis. The UK did not. And then the UK basically was playing catch up throughout April, trying to get more testing, but because Germany had already done a lot of testing and managed to isolate its cases, and the UK could not, the UK therefore fell behind in terms of deaths. Even though we protected our NHS and even though we kept hospital capacity free, and the overall healthcare of the virus was actually very good, and the stringency of our lockdown was actually, as you can see, in keeping with the rest of Europe, and the lockdown timing itself wasn't really that much of an issue, considering that at the time the number of cases and deaths in the UK was behind that of France, Spain and Italy. But because of our testing, most importantly, and because of the way the virus spread, we didn't know, but we should have gone into lockdown sooner, and we should have been testing more. But for some reason, we still yet don't really know the reason why, and this data is again up for debate because of the way in which countries record their data. But for some reason, the virus never really got further than Western Europe. Now, what do you think the reason is? And do you think the UK's response was good for this virus, or do you think it was terrible? I'd like to know your opinions in the comments below. Join in the debate below and subscribe.